This happened during my sophomore year at UC Berkeley. I had just transferred from a community college and was desperate to fit in. My roommate was on the cross-country team, and while I wasn't much of a runner, he convinced me to join a casual running club that met on weekends. I figured it would be a good way to make friends and stay in shape. The club was pretty laid back. About 15 people would gather Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. to run different trails in the Berkeley Hills. The members were mostly other students, with a few locals who'd been part of the group for years. One Saturday in late October, only 5 of us showed up. Myself, my roommate, 2 girls from the volleyball team, and a guy named Marcus who'd been running with the club for about 3 years. None of us had ever met Marcus before. He claimed he was a few semesters above us and mostly kept to himself and never attended any parties. The regular route coordinator had texted that he couldn't make it, so Marcus suggested we try a new trail he'd discovered recently. My roommate was excited about exploring somewhere new, and the others seemed fine with it, so I went along with the plan. We piled into Marcus's SUV and drove about 20 minutes outside of Berkeley, much farther than our usual spots. We arrived at what looked like an unmarked trailhead, with only one other car in the small dirt clearing used for parking. Marcus explained that this trail was less known, but had amazing views that would be worth the extra climb. He mentioned it was about a 6-mile loop that would take us up to a ridge overlooking the bay. We started the run with Marcus leading the way. The trail was barely visible in some spots, nothing like the well-maintained paths we usually took. After about a mile, the trail split. Marcus paused for a moment, then confidently pointed to the right fork, saying this would lead us to the viewpoint. After continuing for another 10 minutes, I started to get a strange feeling. The trail was becoming increasingly overgrown, and we hadn't seen a single other hiker. My roommate had pulled ahead with Marcus while I was keeping pace with the 2 volleyball girls who were starting to question whether we were still on a marked trail. When we stopped for water and met up with Marcus and my roommate, I checked my phone and noticed we had no service. One of the volleyball girls mentioned that her fitness tracker showed we'd already gone nearly 4 miles, yet there was no ridge or viewpoint in sight. Marcus quickly stepped in and explained that it was just around the next bend, slightly further than he remembered. My roommate seemed to trust Marcus completely, but I noticed the girls exchanging worried glances. Something didn't feel right. I casually asked Marcus how many times he'd been on this trail, and his answer changed from a few times earlier to, well, once, but I studied the map carefully. As we continued, the trail narrowed even more until we were essentially bushwhacking through dense undergrowth. One of the volleyball players stopped abruptly and refused to go further, stating that this was clearly not a maintained trail and we should turn back. My roommate tried to convince her it would be faster to complete the loop than retrace our steps. While they were debating, I noticed Marcus checking his phone repeatedly, turning in circles as if trying to get reception. When he saw me watching, he quickly pocketed the device and announced confidently that he recognized where we were and the viewpoint was just ahead. That's when the second volleyball player pointed out that we'd passed the same fallen tree twice. We'd been walking in circles. My roommate finally looked concerned, and Marcus became defensive, insisting he knew where we were going. I suggested we use the compass app on my phone to head consistently east, which should eventually lead us back toward Berkeley. Marcus started arguing against this plan, growing increasingly agitated. He insisted we needed to follow him further up the mountain where he was sure the trail would become clear again. His intense reaction seemed completely disproportionate. My roommate, finally sensing something was off, suggested we all head back together following my compass idea. Marcus's face changed completely. He stared at us silently for an uncomfortable moment, before abruptly turning and walking quickly ahead on the trail, away from the direction we'd decided to go. We called after him, but he disappeared into the trees without looking back. The 4 of us stood there in shock before quickly agreeing to stick together and head east. After nearly 2 hours of careful hiking, we finally emerged onto a marked trail that led us to a different parking area, where, thankfully, another hiker gave us a ride back to campus. We reported the incident to campus police, who informed us that Marcus wasn't even a student. They found no record of him in their system, despite him having claimed to be a graduate student in geology for the past 3 years. The running club had never formally verified his identity. A week later, I saw a police notice about a missing female hiker last seen on a remote trail in the Berkeley Hills. The description of where she disappeared matched exactly with where Marcus had tried to lead us. I still run occasionally, but never again without thoroughly researching the trail beforehand. We never saw Marcus again either. I attended Eastern Michigan University for my undergrad years. I lived in an old Victorian house that had been converted into apartments about a mile from campus. The rent was cheap, which was perfect for a broke college student like me, and I shared the place with 3 other guys who were all in the music program. Our house had this unfinished basement that my roommates had converted into a makeshift recording studio. They'd hung old blankets on the walls for soundproofing and set up their equipment down there. It wasn't pretty, but it worked well enough for their class projects and band practice. I rarely went down there since I wasn't a music major, but one night during midterms week, I needed a quiet place to study. My roommates were all out at a department concert, so I decided to use the basement studio since it was the most soundproof room in the house. The basement had a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling and concrete walls that made the whole space feel damp and cold. I sat up at the small desk in the corner, turned on the heater, and started working on one of my papers. Around midnight, I heard what sounded like the back door opening. I assumed one of my roommates had returned early, but nobody called out like they usually did. Our house was in a neighborhood that had seen a few break-ins that semester, so I started to get nervous. I texted my roommates to see if any of them had come home. All 3 responded that they were still at the after-party and wouldn't be back for hours. That's when I realized I was alone in the house with whoever had just entered. The basement door was at the top of the stairs, and from where I sat, I couldn't see it without walking up. I turned off the space heater to listen better, and heard definite footsteps moving across the kitchen floor directly above me. The floorboards in our old house creaked distinctively, and there was no mistaking the sound of someone walking around. I considered my options. The only exit from the basement was the stairway that led to the kitchen. There was a small window, but it was too small for me to fit through. That meant I was trapped. The footsteps continued for a few minutes, moving from the kitchen to the living room and then toward the bedrooms. I crouched behind the desk, clutching my phone, and trying to decide whether to call the police. Part of me thought I might be overreacting. Maybe it was a friend of one of my roommates. Then I heard the basement door open and the unmistakable sound of someone slowly descending the stairs. I held my breath, frantically looking around for something to use as a weapon. The best I could find was a guitar stand. I grabbed it and positioned myself behind the door that separated the stairs from the studio area. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs, and I could see a shadow through the crack in the door. The handle turned slowly, and as the door began to open, I raised the guitar stand, ready to swing. But before I could, my phone rang loudly. I can't really remember who was calling, but I think it was a friend of mine. The door immediately slammed shut, and I heard rapid footsteps racing back up the stairs. Empowered by knowing the intruder was retreating, I yanked open the door and yelled that I was calling the police. I heard the back door slam as I ran up the basement stairs and locked it behind whoever had fled. I called the cops. They arrived pretty fast, and after searching the house, they confirmed that a robbery had taken place. My roommate's laptop was missing from his bedroom, along with some cash from another guy's drawer. The officers explained that there had been a string of similar break-ins targeting student housing in the area. The intruders would typically watch a house over a long period of time before making a move. Based on the behavior, he must have assumed that the house was empty and completely unexpecting to find me hiding in the basement. What terrified me most was learning that in 2 previous break-ins, students had been home and confronted the burglar, resulting in one student being severely beaten. The police believed it was the same gang but did not have any evidence to support their suspicion. We installed a security system the next day, but for weeks afterward, I couldn't sleep without waking up at every little sound, convinced someone was trying to get in again. I finished my degree at Eastern Michigan, but I never again used the basement studio alone. Even with 4 of us in the house and a new security system, that basement always felt like a trap to me. It's been 5 years since I graduated, but I still double-check every lock before going to sleep.